Hello and welcome today to one of our wonderful webinars. It's Webinar Wednesday. My name is Alison Pellow from People Vision, and today we're going to be running a webinar on introverts and extroverts and how they're feeling about going back into the workplace. So we'll be handing over to Sheila and she will be taking our session for us. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Sheila McAlpine from People Vision, and welcome to this webinar today, which is about engaging introverts and hybrid working. It's as hybrid working becomes more pertinent for all of us. As part of the planning, this is something that we think will help you along the way, and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Hi there, Diane. So thanks so much for coming on the call today. So I think I invited you specifically because we had some dialogue in a previous webinar, and I am an extrovert. I think everybody who knows me knows that. And so I thought it would be really useful to have you come on the call because you come from things at a different side. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you, Alison, and thank you for inviting me. So yeah, my name is Diane Stevenson, and I'm a self-employed facilitator and coach. And whilst I've learned to be extroverted in nature because of the kind of work that I do, my preferences are definitely introverted, and I've got lots of introverted tendencies. So yeah, that's a brief potted.
No, that's great. And I just think that you know, maybe the extroverts need to have a greater understanding of the introverts and how they're feeling about coming back into the workplace, and vice versa. So I'm sure I'm going to put my teeth in. I'm sure Sheila will help us with this journey today.
I'm really looking forward to it, to understand more about how extroverts are thinking rather than just feeling really panicked by them. And the thought of going back into the workplace, I'm thinking, am I going to get overwhelmed by all these extroverted people who've been locked up for 15 months?
Well, let's hope that the session works well and we can chat it out. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Alison Pellow, and this is our, I think, sixth now webinar. We've been running Webinar Wednesdays. I'm going to make Sheila, my lovely Sheila, is our spotlight for today. So we've got a couple of people. Sheila's going to mostly host the session today. And if you could pop the slides up for us, Sheila, that would be great. So what we've decided is been a bit of an organic process to the webinars that we've been doing, and today we're going to be doing engaging introverts and extroverts into the workplace. That's right, yeah, going back a slide. So that's brilliant. So some of the next sessions that we've got running are going to be on mindfulness in the workplace. Got the lovely Frank, who's done some LinkedIn Lives, did LinkedIn Live with me. He's great, Frank. Having difficult conversations virtually. Now, actually, one of my clients is going to help me run that one. Building resilience in changing times. So there are more sessions that we're running. And then today, this is part of our roadmap, which is we identified that there were a number of steps to getting people back into the workplace, and remembering your personal development, offering your team's mental health support, adapting to change, developing excellent management, and managing different working patterns. Always communicate, easy for the extroverts to say. Perfect, not perfect, health and safety. So we then decided we were going to go on to talking about introverts and engaging introverts and extroverts, because it became kind of apparent to me as an extreme extrovert that I would feel very excited, engaged, and I would love to go back into a workplace, but that actually what would be the impact that maybe the introverts didn't have the same thoughts. So we invited Diane, who came on to one of our sessions. So we'll introduce Diane in a moment. But she said, she's a good introvert, and she could share from her perspective what it's like being an introvert and what they would bring to the party. So I am going to mute myself, and I'm going to hand over to Sheila, and she's going to take the session. But I might interrupt you, Sheila. There you go.
Yeah, what's new? Okay. Hello, this is me. I'm Sheila McAlpine. And I've been working with Myers-Briggs, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, for about 20 years because it's very aging to say that. And I've used Myers-Briggs with teams and on a one-to-one basis. And although those of you who are familiar with Myers-Briggs will know there are other elements to it, the introvert and extrovert element seems to have the biggest impact on other things. So as Alison said, when we were looking at hybrid working, we thought it would be something positive to focus on. So I'm going to be doing some of the talking, but I'm going to be helped by my two colleagues. So Alison has already mentioned that she has a preference for extroversion. We also have here Diane Stevenson. And Diane, could you say a wee bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Sheila. So my name's Diane Stevenson, and I'm a self-employed facilitator and coach. And although I've learned to be more extroverted through the course of my role, I very much have introverted tendencies and have a preference for introversion, generally speaking. Would you like me to say more, Sheila?
Thank you.
My introverted nature makes me want to shut up
No, that's
anymore.
Fine. Thank you very much. That's fine. So this is going to be some slides, but then when we're chatting, I'll get rid of them. And if you could use the chat function, if you have any questions or comments, that'd be really helpful. And I'll build in time for questions as well. As Alison mentioned, we'll be recording this, so you can watch it again if you wanted to afterwards, and be ready to mute and unmute yourself. I'm sure you're used to that now. At the end of this session, my expectation is that you'll understand some of the key differences between introverts and extroverts in the workplace we're focusing on. Also, how to get the best out of each personality type, and then implement hybrid working effectively with your team and to use it to contribute towards everyone being happy and productive. That's the aim. So this term, introversion and extroversion, they kind of get bandied around, and as you hear them, maybe you already have a view of where you sit. Maybe you think of yourself as being more extroverted, maybe more introverted, or maybe you're thinking, do you know, I'm a bit of both, that some circumstances are more outgoing and sometimes more reflective. And in Myers-Briggs, they use this concept of preference. So in the same way, we can use both our hands day to day. We actually have a preference for one hand. So what I'd like you to think about as we go through these next few slides, I want to think about yourself and which one sits more comfortably with you. But I'd also like you to think about your colleagues and the people around you and where you think they maybe sit. But let's start with this slide here, which looks at introversion versus extroversion. We always put introverts first because the extroverts will speak up anyway. So you always let the introverts have their two pennies at the beginning. So one of the things you maybe noticed when you first started working remotely was how people dealt with the fact you were away from the office. So people with a preference for introversion were maybe more likely to be comfortable working on their own and would pick up the phone or use Zoom if they wanted to speak to somebody. Whereas people with a preference for extroversion were, because of liking that large social network, were more likely to be making a lot of contact. And I was talking to a team I'm working with last week, and they were saying that when they first went into lockdown, they had this coffee catch-up, they called it. And at the beginning, loads of people, the team would come on every single time and there'd be lots of enthusiasm for it. But then as time went on and people adapted to working at home, so interest in it started to wane. And I don't know whether it's just the extroverts who still come to the coffee catch-up, but it's a possibility. As far as being the centre of attention is concerned, the introverts, if you think in a large group, the introverts are more likely to be listening, maybe joining in with the person next to them, whereas the extrovert tends to be the life and soul and leading the conversation. Now, with this third point, I think this is particularly pertinent for hybrid working, and one of the things you might think about in terms of adapting for both types. So with people with a preference for introversion, they'll tend to think things through, then talk things through, and then think things through. Whereas for extroverts, it goes the other way. It's really important to them, their way of working through something is to talk it through, then reflect, and then talk it through again. Then you see there's something about preference for smaller groups against larger groups. For introverts, of course, we can do both. And that's something I want to say at this point, that people with a preference for introversion, and I think Diane said this, you have to engage with the world. And so you can be good at presenting, you can be good at meetings. Likewise, extroverts can zip it if they're talking to a friend on a one-to-one who wants to talk something through, and they can listen. But if you generalize, you would say that with introverts, they would need time alone to recharge. So if you've been at a party, then you probably need to have a bit of a switch off at the end. Whereas people with a preference for extrovert will still be buzzing from being around other people. Then there's something about working in the quiet against working in open work settings. And if you think about before lockdown, then the introverts would often be the people who would get frustrated if there was someone on the desk next to them having a bit of a social chat or even a work chat. Whereas for the extroverts, probably more able to handle that. There's no definitive around this, it's always probably. And then there's something about decision making there, more reflective against talking it through, that reflects with that. And then the introverts can be very misunderstood, can be seen as being reserved and not sociable, whereas actually they are sociable people, but don't show it quite as much. Whereas the extroverts tend to be more outgoing and more enthusiastic. So as I've talked through those things, then maybe you're thinking tick, 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 and thinking about your colleagues. So let me now move into, and if you have any comments, put them in the chat at that point. Let's move on to the next slide, because we're focusing on the introverts, because they can be misunderstood.
Do you think they're more misunderstood than the extroverts?
Well, I will say something about that in a moment, actually. This says some of the perks of being an extrovert. I've got to say, I think introverts can make great leaders as well. And if you were to look at the Myers-Briggs type of some of the really great leaders, a lot of them will be introverts, but they learn to do the extroverted thing. So it's down to balance again. So you can see all these things here, and you can see the energy. And actually picking up on what Alison said, what people have said to me is sometimes it is really exhausting, because everybody is dependent upon you to be the life and soul of the party, or to be the person at team events or team meetings who keeps things going. And sometimes you might think, for goodness sake, give me a break, just let someone else take over. But whether that's from the perspective of an extrovert, because the introverts are actually quite happy to have a bit of a pause, because I think the other day Alison and I were talking and there was a pause, and Alison said it was really hard for her not to leap in and say something. And then if you think about that in relation to a Teams or a Zoom call, then it's very hard to generate those moments of pause and reflection. But extroverts have lots of good things going for them, but so do the introverts. And here are some things that introverts would like you to know. And if you think about that turquoisey one, I know how to listen, I give you advice, it's been thoughtfully considered. That's something that you may be recognised from meetings, that it's played out there, that there will be a bundle of people who have been talking about various things. And then after maybe 5 minutes, the person who's maybe the person with a preference for introversion speaks up and somehow summarises the whole conversation because they've been thinking it through and then make their comment. So definitely people who are worth listening to. And that bottom right one there is that as extroverts learn to be quieter in those moments and reflect, so introverts can learn to be extroverted. So we're not worried about how we are. We can just stay like that and we can be quite content. Is that fair, Diane? You can nod or shake your head.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Yeah, thank you. And here's a fun slide, how to love an introvert. And there are some things there that particularly make me smile. That one at the bottom, it may take a bit for us to open up, but know you're special when we do. And maybe some of you recognise that within 5 minutes of meeting some people, that you've heard their life story. I was playing tennis the other day and I had a new partner and I still had my boot open to get the tennis racket out. And she was telling me about the fact she'd been married, divorced, her husband had just died, she'd just moved from Norwich. It's kind of overwhelming, but maybe you recognise that. Whereas with introverts, it's something that comes later on. That top right one, instead of trying to make us be social, focused on making us comfortable. Introverts can be sociable as well and enjoy socializing. One of the things about hybrid working is that I think when we first started working from home, there were a lot of Zoom quizzes. Didn't we all do Zoom quizzes? Loads of fun things on Zoom. And I think it was seen as the way of keeping teams together. But that can be exhausting because for people with a preference for introversion, maybe you want to catch up with your colleagues, but you want to get your work done as well. Any comments on that in the chat?
Yeah, I think you also might be making an assumption about extroverts who want to be on Zoom and doing fun things on Zoom. They don't either, you know. Just I think this is all it's horses for courses and what's going on for you at the time and how you feel about it, how tech savvy you are, and you know, different things. So what James said as an example is that I'm an introvert, but I really dislike models like this. They're too simplistic if it's taken at face value. And I think there is an element of, yeah, you know, where you are, how busy you are, how many projects you've got on, what's going on. You know, certainly at the beginning of the COVID situation, obviously we were probably all of us learning new well, a lot of us were learning new technology, new ways of working. We were either earning money or not earning money. We were stressed out about furloughing our staff. You know, there was an awful lot of pressure in different aspects of that. Tammy says, I'm very much an introvert by nature, an INFJ, but as Sheila said, I've adapted to act more as an extrovert in my role. And I think it is about us being aware, and I am an extrovert, as I know, but it really helped me do my Myers-Briggs to understand that more about myself, so that I was better in a group situation. But I'll hand over now back. Let Diane say something, or you know, back to Sheila.
Yeah, I'm happy to say.
I'd like to show you this. Oh, sorry, Diane, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say that one of the things that was standing out for me while you were talking before was, you know, the assumption perhaps that sometimes introverts don't have anything to say. And one of the things I find really irritating as an introvert is when you're engaged in conversation, either on a one-to-one basis or where there's a group of people, whether it's face-to-face or virtual, if I haven't spoken, it's perhaps assumed that I've got nothing to say. So it'll get to the end of the meeting, I've got a whole bunch of stuff to say, but nobody's asked me a question. I haven't had a platform to do that. And that's one of my biggest fears of hybrid working, going back into a space where all these extroverts are going to jump in after being locked up for 15 months. And I'm never going to be asked what I think and feel. And I find I can do it, but I find it really stressful. And I'm not looking forward to that part of going back to work properly.
Thank you. I want to show you this slide on some tips on leading, and they're general tips on leading to let people shine. Then we'll move on to looking at hybrid working specifically. And you'll see some of those things from the first slide reflected here. So let's look at hybrid working. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can see you all. Yes, somebody said it's all very contextual. It is contextual. And let's look at this in terms of hybrid working. And I was thinking about something a friend said. He said, oh, I'm really not looking forward to returning to work. I really like to have my routine and I can get on with my work without all the chit chat. And then somebody else, so this man has preference for introversion, so you have to think of how he is viewing it. He said he could hear his daughter on a Zoom call through the era talking about hair stuff, and he was thinking, why aren't they getting on with work? And then, of course, they did in the end, but there's that social aspect. So in terms of hybrid work, one of the things that the team I was working with last week was saying is that it's quite difficult thinking about escalation, because if you were part of the hybrid working PVH People Vision call last week, you heard that somebody said that you don't have those casual conversations. You're not just walking past someone's desk. So if you have a preference for introversion, it's likely that if you hit a problem, you're going to want to try and think it through yourself, and you might be more reluctant to actually arrange for a Zoom call or pick up the phone and speak to a colleague or your manager. Whereas if you have a preference for extroversion, you're maybe likely to feel more comfortable to do that. So one of the things that I think can be helpful with hybrid working is to agree what the convention is, to agree when there should be those conversations set up. And if you can use your general communication effectively to include everybody, then it could be part of the agenda, if you like. Because I was reflecting on this, and if you think about how things were before the lockdown, we already were dealing with remote working, that you had people in different offices and people weren't working from home as much as they are now, but it was already in place. And already, I think you were probably found yourself thinking about how can we make sure that we're maintaining communication. So if you had something happened in the office, how did you include the other people who weren't there? How did you make sure the other offices that you're not in were keeping up to date? And I think it's important to use the strengths from what you were doing before and to almost magnify them for the situation that we're going to be in from here on as we move to hybrid working. The team I was talking with last week, I mentioned this coffee catch-up. As far as remote working is concerned, I've heard managers say, I try to make sure I speak to my team for, say, 10 minutes every morning just to hear what's going on. So maybe that's something you can build in, where you have a coffee catch-up for a quarter of an hour and have some agreement with that if there's something somebody's bothering them, they can give you a ring or to arrange a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams call. Oh, Alison's put a question. How are you communicating your business to help both introverts and extroverts. So I've been talking for a wee while, but can you put your comments on that in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and comment, that would be helpful. Don't all rush at once.
Number one extrovert obviously can't wait to speak.
I think, can I jump in?
Please, please do.
Good morning, everybody. So I've just joined a new firm, and it's still part of my induction. But one thing that I used to do in the previous organisation was have a daily check-in, which was optional, but a real kind of informal. You know, we can talk about the weather if that's what we need to do. But just for those extroverts, like my good self, ENFP, self-declared, just to have a touch point, you know, after breakfast was so important, because I may not see anybody else for the rest of the day. And actually, that was initially hugely isolating. So I think just creating the space for people to opt in or not, if you like, but ensuring that we tune into those people who don't regularly attend and ensuring that we have dialogue with them. So yeah, it's not deeply radical, but just having a regular rrhythm was certainly really important in the first lockdown and into second. Friday socials and all that came later, of course, but yeah, and we've all boarded quizzes by the end of it, but it challenges the creativity.
Yes, yeah. Any other comments?
I just think as people on the call who are actually managers, they need to think about their individual team members and what they think, you know, really have that reflection time about what does that individual like and how can they help them shine, how can they help them be part of what is going on. So I think so often we think about people in, you know, as a group. So I know we're talking about returning to the workplace, but what really, you know, spending that extra bit of time to talk to people about this piece around, you know, maybe you're a bit quieter. How do you feel about working back? You know, so really getting to the minutiae of that conversation. And some people may not have even thought about it. But like Diane said, I mean, Diane, how do you think you could bring it up with someone without saying you're really quiet? How are you going to cope back in the office? How do you think it would be? How do you think it would be good to talk to ask the introverted, moderate introvert?
Yeah,
people?
I mean, as an introvert, I would obviously say on a one-to-one basis, just a very quiet chat about, you know, how things have been going through lockdown, how they're feeling about what's going to happen next, what are the biggest fears. What might stand in the way of them being able to get back into a productive space. And I suppose some of what was coming up for me while you were talking, yes, is about our teams and how we lead them and how the different interactions are going to change when we get back into the workplace. But I was also curious about us as leaders. If we are introverted as leaders, then what kind of draw is there going to be on our resilience if we've got a team full of extroverts? Because all of these extroverts are going to want a piece of us. So how are we as leaders going to remain in a really effective and productive place when our resources are going to be so depleted by all of these rampant extroverts?
Yes. So something that I saw was to have an agreement that there's no expectation that everyone's digital door is always open. So you have some agreement about time periods when you're happy to chat. You know, in the same way, if you're working with people from other countries, you agree when there are specific times when you'll talk to them. So you say, well, let's agree that between 9 and 10, picking up Craig's point, 9 and 10, our digital doors are open and we can have those conversations. I was looking at what Ori said there about working with young people, and one of the problems that have been faced, of course, is the fact we have new people joining organisations, young or old, and how to make them feel part of the team and happy. So, Ori, have you got anything to add to that about what you've done?
Yes, I do. Young people are very interesting because I do a lot of public speaking work with young people, which is obviously going to be scary for those who want to be left alone. And you find in those sessions that you get the couple who are extroverts who want to take over the whole day and answer every question and jump in front of everyone, which is my tendency as a human being. And I've had to learn to pull myself back and not get excited like a little Labrador every time I get an opportunity to be with people. And so what I've had to do, and what I've had to do within my training sessions, and I would have up to 30 young people for 6 hours, is make sure I organize the day in a way that everyone could have their say, but without putting somebody who is either nervous or anxious, or maybe just an introvert, without putting them too much on the spot. And so it's just building that, it's hard within 6 hours, but building that rapport, quickly getting to know who is who and working with them, but also giving everybody an opportunity to participate. It doesn't always work, but it is tricky trying to get everyone to feel that, you know, they're involved and they're valued as a person.
Thank you. I was thinking about that, and in the same way in the office, how you have meetings with lots of people and smaller group meetings, I think it's important to do the same thing for calls like this, because certainly when I've been training on Zoom, there are some people who say nothing in the main group, but when you put them into the smaller groups, then they start to open up, and you can do that on Zoom and on Microsoft Teams, of course. And can I say thank you to Jane for her comment that they've agreed meetings-free Fridays, which is a great. I'm guessing that for all of you, you've introduced the convention where if you're having big meetings like this one, everybody is on mute, and then you put up your actual or virtual, you know, using the little logo to let people speak, because that can certainly help the people with a preference for introversion to say what they have to say. And if that isn't happening, so this isn't my idea, I saw this online, that somebody said if you say someone's name, then that's a good way of getting into the virtual discussion. Because what can happen, particularly when you're talking virtually, that two of us go and speak at once. So let's say it's Alison and me. Alison goes to speak, I go to speak. Because I am more introverted than extroverted, I go, oh, sorry, and I'd be quiet. So as the introvert, if you want to participate at a meeting, then you'd say, Alison, there's something I'd like to say, which is that. And then you carry on speaking, and that's a way of getting your voice heard. Another point I heard thinking about introverts was that in that same way that extroverts are more likely to tell you about themselves, so extroverts are more likely to be saying, oh, I was really pleased with this piece of work I did the other day. It was really hard, but I managed to sell to someone or other, or I managed to persuade them to do this. And introverts can be more likely to maybe tell their friend or their partner about it, but maybe not spread the word. And actually, if you're introverted, you should still be out there. But instead of doing what might seem like bragging, you can maybe speak to somebody who is influential within your team and quietly tell them what you've been doing, and let them spread the word for you. One other, I see we're getting to 11:32. So one other question I wanted to ask you was, in terms of returning to the office, I know some people's personal circumstances will mean that it's been difficult working from home if they're in a small flat with somebody else working there and with children, animals, what have you. But it's more likely that extroverts are going to want to be in the office before the introverts. And I wondered what your thoughts were about how to make sure there's a balance, because we know that extroverts will be there to talk things through, can be dynamic. The introverts are there to think things through, but are maybe not going to be the first one to put their hands up. So then we get to the impact of that on the team. So what do you think you can be doing in terms of getting that balance for people back at work? I wondered. You're welcome to put things in the chat or unmute yourselves.
think some
Okay,
work.
maybe that's an issue for
Workshops
people
can
then.
be useful, Sheila, to understand. So you and I do both understand.
Say that again, Alison.
I think that having some workshops to understand to people and to sort of allow this dialogue to be a bit more, you don't have to have all the slides. I mean, we're going to put these slides out on our you know, for free for people to use in PDF form. You know, you could use this and as a starting place, as a talking place with your teams to say, what do they think they are and how do they want to operate? And is your question more about getting them back into the office? Is that what you're aiming at with your question?
Yes. No, sorry, I was reading Christine's chat and I stopped listening to you. You caught me out. I was reading Christine's chat. She said her is mainly introvert, so they'll be going to the office less days per week. So that's interesting. So I wondered that my question would be, how do you make sure you still get that introverted perspective so that the extroverts aren't maybe running away with it? And you have those people reflecting and contributing. So it's fine for the extroverts to be in the office. And maybe it's about building in time like this, where you're online with the people at home, where you're talking about the conclusions from your discussions and get their perspective, or maybe email them so they can think about it before you make the final decision.
But I don't know whether this
all right, so somebody said here
speaking, but I think it's good for you to sort of label yourself a bit and say, well, look, I am a bit more of an extrovert and I'm aware I'm working with Diane. What do you like? Do you know, so if you can start to have that dialogue and talking word in the labels, then people will forgive you more or accept you more or encourage you more. So I think it's just about having an open conversation with people.
Of reference, isn't it, Alison? I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I feel there's also a responsibility, not that it's all on the manager stroke leader's shoulders, but certainly, you know, some of the information you've been sharing today, I know Anne-Marie's on the call, we work together, so there's a little bit of education of line management leaders of how this is different, because this is a change. It's I was just talking this morning about colleagues who've, you know, used to been, you know, for years, I myself included, I've always got commuted into an office space, you know, 9 to 5, pretty much Monday to Friday. That's going to not be the norm, right? So it's going to be multi-location and certainly working from home for at least 1, maybe 2 days a week at some point. They might vary across each of the days. So really making that adjustment, therefore, of how leaders need to attend to their teams, really tune in perhaps a way that they haven't always in the past. You know, I think that's the shift.
I think there's somebody mentioned the word trust in the chat earlier on, and that's part of it, isn't it? That you're willing to be open and trust each other to say, this is what works for me in terms of working together, or when we're working in a hybrid way, this is something that's going to help me contribute most to the team. And it's encouraging that openness and hoping that there is trust between you. Thank you, Craig. So are there any other questions or comments? Oh gosh, that's interesting.
If I could add one there, Sheila, please. I suppose there's something else about, you know, everybody feeling comfortable with the difference, because, you know, it takes a combination, it takes different personalities, different skill sets, different ways of seeing the world to make a high performing team. And I think as soon as the team can see what the differences are, recognize what the differences are, understand the differences, they're more likely to be able to respect the differences, embrace them. And by that nature process, then the introverts are going to feel that they are in a more trusting environment and more accepted for being quieter and respected that they do have something to say, and therefore allow them a bit more of a platform. Because I think that the point that came up in the chat, I think, is really, really important about that feeling of trust and feeling comfortable to speak. So yeah, it was just about respecting differences within a team in order for them to become a high performing team.
Thank you very much, Diane. I noticed that Jane made a comment that we all worked together in the office before, so hey, what's different? And I think there's a lot been said about the fact we're not going back to the old way of working. We have a new norm. So we've had this period of working remotely. Let's learn from that. And of course, everybody's going to be okay going back into the office, but maybe like we had to adjust to the change from being working at home. So there's going to be a period of change working in the office again and getting that hybrid working. So that's something I'd say there. And I missed the one before. Somebody has said, Tammy said she'd welcome the idea of having a quiet zone where you can choose to work without interruptions. That's a great idea. And maybe it's possible to create that as we go back to the office. And then Loretta, the balance of teams working from home and office. Conversation has a place within mental health. Yeah, there is a lot to consider, and maybe the work and not on the basis of introversion, extroversion, but if you have some flexibility in the same way that, was it James said there was a team of where there were more introverts, and so there was going to be that flexibility that they would be able to work. Lockdown, a lot of companies would say, oh no, we can't possibly do this working from home, but because we've had to, then we found we can. So now it's a case of taking the best of this working from home and incorporating the fact that it is possible to go back to the office and taking the learning from both.
Sheila, thank you so much.
So, Alice, I was about to wrap up and pass over to you with the last few slides. Shall I do that? Because I'm looking at the time.
Okay, thanks. So thanks so much, Sheila and Diane. And it's been some great chat going on the chat box today as well. So just wanted to a couple of things. One is to say that we would love it if anyone wouldn't mind, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, stay behind and just giving us a little bit of a testimonial at the end. It's really simple. You just have to stay on the line, and it would just be sort of saying hi and thank you for the session today. But some of the slides that Sheila's just whizzed through there, there's some...
Oh, sorry, shall I go back?
Sure, yeah, if you don't mind, just to really quickly say, a lot of what we've been covering falls out of the framework of the CIPD. They've done a really good hybrid working report, so I just bring it back to that, and it covers different things such as management training, the technology and the equipment that your employees need, the well-being, performance management, inclusive and fairness, and then the employee life cycle and all the different aspects that has on hybrid working. So that's a really useful, you can go to the next slide, that's a really useful piece of HR kit if you wanted to look on the CIPD website. So yeah, this is what it pans out. But I guess from our perspective, you know, it might be nice to have facilitated workshops in your organisations to talk about introverts, extroverts, and how they can bring the most, like Diane was saying, you know, to bring the most to your business. If you could go to the next slide, Sheila, that would be great. So just really in summary, what we've covered today is the key differences between introverts and extroverts in the workplace, specific to hybrid working, how to get the best out of those different personality types, and implementing and thinking about hybrid working. I'll just repeat, I do think it's about thinking about individuals, think about yourself as an individual, thinking about your team, what they might want, talking to them. I love the idea of meeting free Friday, or, you know, touching base. It's about just doing the right thing for your team, and I think that's going to change. You know, hybrid working I think it is here to stay. For how long, I don't know, but anyway, so yeah, just keep that conversation going. Next slide, please, Sheila. Yeah, so back to the roadmap, and then think the next slide, and then we can probably take the slides off. Yeah, so that's our contact details. So yeah, I mean, Oh, so we're going to put the three of us back on. So, you know, so Diane, how do you feel at the other end of that session?
Yeah, more understanding of the extroverts and thinking I'm not a freak because I'm an introvert, because there are other introverted people on the call. And in some ways, more looking forward to going back to the workplace than I was before. Because of course, I work in different workplaces all the time, but I still have this. Do I want to get together with my extroverted colleagues on a more regular basis? Probably not. But I probably need to articulate a little bit more what my fears are regarding that hybrid working picture.
I think that's really good to say that, because I think I can only say it as an extrovert. We're not mind readers, so we don't know if we're getting on your nerves or we're inviting you to too many meetings or too many this and too that. So please, we just ask you. Oh, go on, Sheila, what you want to say something, Sheila?
Oh, I was waving goodbye to Ori.
All right. So yeah, I think we've just all got to kind of. So I, as extrovert, have to say what's best for you, Diane, and you have to say, hang on, you haven't asked me whether I like that idea.
Yeah.
You know, and we just have to keep working through. So listen, guys, thank you so much. Sheila, any final comments from you?
I was really grateful for the comments and the feedback. It was good in the chats, it was good to get that feedback as we were talking. So thank you.